In today's video, we're going to be sorting out the absolute chaos that is my boys' room right now. This is the third episode in my Burnout House series, where I've been going room to room, trying to get things back to a manageable level, so we can start again and do our best not to let things get to such an overwhelming state again. If you're a family with ADHD though, you'll understand that's a lot harder said than done, and that's going to be my topic for today. But first, as usual, I'm going to show you around, and then we're going to come up with a plan to get through this mess in the fastest way possible, and in a way that keeps the stress to a minimum. I know in the past I would have looked at a room like this and thought, this is going to take all day, and I've got no idea where to start. And honestly, more often than not, I would have just closed the door and left it as a problem for another day. But I'm going to show you here that it doesn't have to take that long at all. All you need is a system. My system in situations like this is simple. Scan the room, pick the thing you think is covering the most surface area and therefore making the most mess. In this case, I chose clothes, and clear that first. Not only does that prevent overwhelm, because you're essentially ignoring everything else, all the paper, all the pens, all the toys, and you're zoned in on searching for that one thing. For me, cleaning like this is a great source of satisfaction. It's not boring and tedious, it's actually fun. I compare it to when a dog's in its element, sniffing around and searching for a scent. And when you've cleared every item, there's a marked difference already, and you can move on to the next thing. The second thing you think is causing a noticeable amount of mess. Now, why are there clothes strewn all over the floor in the first place? Good question, and I'm going to do my best to explain. See, quite often in an ADHD household, we'll have the best intentions. We'll start household chores, but then end up getting distracted and not completing them. So I'm taking full responsibility for the clothes situation in this bedroom. It started with me washing and drying the clothes, even going as far as folding them and putting them into a pile. This is what me and Rudy are going to be tackling later on in the day, by the way. It goes downhill, however, when I started putting the pile on top of the toy kitchen rather than putting them into the clothes drawers immediately. And this is what I mean by we have the best intentions. It's usually that it's time to cook dinner, or I've been called downstairs for something. Maybe a little disagreement's broken out. Or, 8 times out of 10, I've ran out of steam for the task and I've promised myself, well, I'll get it sorted before bed. And I think we all know how that ends. Anyway, a few days later, I've got another round of washing sorted. Plonk it on top of the pile that's already there, because now it's a bigger task and it requires more time, and I've got other stuff I need to be getting on with. So I'm going to carve out some time later to get through the big pile. Did I? No, I didn't. I completely forgot it existed. Meanwhile, the boys have been playing in here, obviously. The pile's been knocked onto the floor. My youngest pulled everything out of the play kitchen. It's all muddled up with the clothes now. My eldest has got his pens out because he's knee-deep in a creation and completely in his own world. Pens strewn all over the floor. I do another round of washing. This time, because there's already mess on the floor, I just throw the clothes onto the floor drobe. And this is a weird psychological phenomenon, and I struggle to articulate it because it doesn't really make any logical sense. But once there's a large mess on the floor, it automatically becomes a dumping pile to me and to the rest of the family. And the room's no longer something that I'm aiming to keep on top of and keep tidy. It's now a project that I'll get to at some point, and who cares if a little bit more mess is added to it. Don't get me wrong, looking at it stresses us out and we think, oh God, why has this happened again? But it's usually the case that we're already treading water trying to keep on top of everything else. But yeah, so although the kids have made the majority of this mess, I am responsible, or I feel responsible for the mess originating. Now you're probably thinking, why is your eldest son not putting away his own clothes? And that's a valid question, and that's because he still needs prompting a lot of the time. He's not at a point where he sees things that need to be done and automatically does them. Remember I said we're a family of people with ADHD. So a lot of the things I don't notice around the house or I struggle with, he struggles with tenfold because his brain's still developing. Remember, neurodivergence has a huge genetic component. It runs in families. Just the other day we were out and about at a pumpkin patch and Rudy was in his element, daydreaming, And my mum had tried to talk to him and he wasn't hearing her, wasn't responding. Sometimes it takes a few shouts to snap him out of his imaginary land. Now this really aggravated my mum, and she'd said to him, "You need to start listening." And this really upset him because to him, he just didn't hear her. He wasn't trying to be rude. And I know this because I was the same. And I tried to explain this to my mum, but I didn't have the words at the time. But a behaviour's only naughty if you're intentionally doing it. Same as forgetfulness. It's not something you can teach someone out of. Does that make sense? I later said to Charlie, telling Rudy he needs to listen more is like telling a fish it needs to learn to fly. It ultimately only makes someone feel bad about themselves. My mum's concern was it's dangerous and yeah, possibly. But hey, I'm still here plodding along. And my daydreaming became less and less frequent as I grew older and I became more alert. Anyway, he will happily and enthusiastically help out if he's asked to. Problem is, I need to organise my own brain and all of the crosses on my own checklist and remember to ask and to guide him. That's when it comes to things like household chores specifically because that is my kryptonite. This is something I think a lot of people overlook when ADHD parents especially will talk about their struggles with keeping on top of the house. We'll often get met with, "You need to train your kids and it will take the pressure off you." And we'll be sat here thinking, I'm still learning to train myself. A lot of the time, epically failing and floundering. Anyway, Rudy happily helps around the house when he's asked to. And he's been really working on and taking pride in keeping his room clean. And I'll go into that in a second because it's really relevant. I've been noticing in recent months he's been taking it upon himself to clear his space. But at the end of the day, these clothes were not put away because I didn't ask him to put them away. And that's on me as the adult in the situation. An important thing to remember in a situation like this, in a bunch of people where things like habit and routine don't stick in a way they necessarily should, and I've spoken about this in a few previous videos, our issues with building and stacking habits, but in the quickest way I can explain it, it's hard for us to form a habit, but also, when we miraculously manage it, if we miss a day, it's like we never developed that habit at all, and we have to start again. The best example I always use, because a lot of people really criticise this one and think forming a habit and all of the neurological processes that go along with it are the same for everyone. Repeat something often enough and you'll do it on autopilot. That's the general consensus. For me, even at age 31, I struggle to brush my teeth. And I'm being really vulnerable here, but I'm really inconsistent with it because it isn't automatic for me. And my dental health has suffered for it. With most people, it's something you don't even have to think about. You engage in your evening routine like you do every day. It's the same every day, and brushing your teeth is just part of that. For us, no evening is the same. I have to remember and make a conscious effort every evening and every morning, I need to brush my teeth. And even when I do remember, I have to convince myself to do it because I have sensory issues surrounding it. We set alarms now and they work most of the time, and luckily, Charlie, who's my partner for people who are new here, he manages to keep everyone on track with that, so the kids are good. And all of this stuff about habits is relevant to the topic because I can't even count the amount of times I'm told you need to start your children off with household chores young, and then it just becomes automatic for them. How do you explain the complexity of a situation like this? That one, we have and still do teach and include our children in the household chores. Two, even despite our best efforts, we're never going to be consistent with it 100% of the time. And three, even if we were, it's still turning out to be that it's not an automatic thing for our kids. If it does turn out to be the case that our efforts have paid off and what we've taught sinks in and they do it automatically, then great, life's going to be easier for them. But we're prepared and we're armed with the knowledge of how to deal with things as a parent if that doesn't turn out to be the case. And there'll be no shaming and criticising and humiliating in this house. Again, I want to reiterate here, we're not assuming that it's going to be the case for them, and we're not resigning ourselves to this idea or being held back by our own issues and not trying to teach them life skills. Like I said earlier, Rudy has started to do some cleaning off his own back, and that's just a fabulous thing to see. There's a difference between remembering or choosing to do something because the mood struck you and doing something out of habit though. And you'll see that in people that consistently manage to keep their house tidy and who never have to do big cleanups like this. Sometimes, and I'm sure a lot of people in the same situation can relate, you feel like your children deserve better than you. But I remind myself, there are many things that I am brilliant at as a mother, and that reflects in my children's happiness and self-esteem and confidence. I'm empathetic, I'm emotionally intelligent, I'm kind, I'm enthusiastic, I'm introspective. I'm always trying to be better as a parent. And that reflects in the chats we have in these videos, and the very fact I started this channel to hold myself accountable and be better for my kids. My experiences as a messy and flaky child allow me to be more forgiving as a parent. There are always going to be things we excel at and things we struggle at. And no matter what these things are, the mum guilt is overwhelming because we want the best for our kids. And so I said in the last episode, I'm going to answer the very common comment of you need to teach your partner and train your kids to tidy up after themselves. And I'm going to carry on here, but say that this is a multi-layered and very complex and nuanced situation when things like ADHD and autism are in the picture. I don't have all the answers. Things change every day, and all any of us are doing is consistently learning and evolving. Points or explanations I made on this channel even a year ago might be different now because my kids are older and I'm different. I've learnt more about myself and why I might do some of the things I do. And that's a healthy thing. And it allows me to help as many people as I can with this channel. Anyway, before I go any further, I want to point out that what I'm doing now is something I call segmenting, where I'll pick a spot in a room and clear that segment. After I cleared the main issues, the clothes, paper, pens, teddies, it got down to the really finicky bits like Legos and bits of rubbish, and I needed to switch tactics to something more effective for this particular type of mess. Anyway, this series is called Burnout House Clean. Why am I bringing that up? Well, it's because I think 6 of the rooms were cleared at the end of August, and this room was cleared about a few weeks ago, in October. I didn't film this room at the end of August because it was pristine. It was the only room in the house that was consistently tidy, and that's because Rudy, bless him, had kept it tidy. If you've watched the previous 2 parts of this series, you'll know that I was doing my best to try and keep on top of the rooms I'd already cleared, using 10-minute timers and then working my way through the rest of the house. That's when the clothes pile started to turn up on the toy kitchen, and then eventually this happened. So now the rest of the house is acceptable. We're keeping on top of it. But now having to do a big clean in this room. And this is important and something I really, really want to talk about when it comes to things like burnout. Burnout happens when you have reached your emotional and physical limit. For us, as silly as it sounds, trying to keep on top of the house is exhausting, more emotionally than physically. Trying to juggle a million plates is not easy, not for anybody. And aside from having this channel, I also work outside of the home, and I'm also trying to be a present parent and a good friend and all of that, and it just becomes overwhelming for me. Anyway, during the summer holidays with the kids at home, it just became extra hard to keep on top of the house, and not only was I struggling, but Charlie was struggling too, and we were both burnt out. Both still are, because it's not something that just goes away. Charlie already does more than his fair share trying to keep up with the 4 of us and the consistent mess we make. Don't get me wrong, he's also messy and forgetful, and I spend a lot of time picking up after him, but it's a mutual relationship and we both pick up each other's slack. I'm drifting away from my original point though, which is that once burnout happens, it becomes more and more difficult to get back to base level. So I've done this big clean, but it doesn't mean that our issues with burnout have been resolved and miraculously disappeared. This big mess piled up in August, and it's October now, and we're still dealing with the ramifications. But anyway, if you're wondering, as you go through this series, this particular episode was filmed in October and the rest were filmed in August. So we're going to go back to August in the next episode. But I just thought it was really relevant to clean the boys' room whilst I was talking about this particular topic. It's been really important to me, especially in this series where I'm delving into topics like executive dysfunction and time blindness, to highlight some of the issues or hurdles a neurodivergent parent might face in more detail, and why statements like instill habits from an early age aren't that simple when you struggle with sticking to habits yourself. I want to highlight the guilt that comes with that. I know a lot about childhood development and how important things like consistency are to a forming brain. It's something I obsessed over when I was pregnant with Rudy, who's my eldest son. Before that, I was obsessed with brain development in general, how we learn, how we can undo and rewire our brains when certain behaviours aren't necessarily beneficial or productive. Obviously, I've dealt with my own brain forever, so I've been on a voyage of discovery and always wanted to figure out how to get the most out of myself and meet potential I knew I had. So these topics are far from alien to me. And then I made my appearance on social media and I had 1,000 parents trying to educate me on the importance of habit and routine. And my ego wanted to scream, I know all of this! But that's all it is, ego. We all have them, whether we like to admit it or not. I was an expert on parenting before I became a parent. I think we all are, aren't we? We all have grand ideas and dreams about how things are going to go. I think to an extent we all anticipate some form of resistance from our children down the line and hurdles and struggles. And that's all part of the parenting experience, shaping young minds and trying to raise good humans. I never expected resistance from myself though, and not being able to meet my own expectations as a mum every day. See, there's a huge difference between having the knowledge and the tools and applying what you've learned in a real life situation. When you're sleep deprived and overwhelmed, and the time you used to take out, in my case, hours and hours a day of reading and meditating and exercising, to keep myself stable and level-headed and grounded and in some semblance of routine. I thought I'd found the key to being the best version of myself, but it took a lot of time each day. And then you become a parent and you realise that time is no longer yours. And so you have to navigate that and figure out who you are without all of these coping mechanisms. You really do find yourself in survival mode a lot of the time. Add children to the mix who are their own person from day one, and they might not be especially receptive to your grand ideas about how this was all going to go. Oh, it's all so much fun. But that leads me to my next point. Is it nature or is it nurture? Or a bit of both. By the way, because it's October, I was also decorating for Halloween as I tidied, and you're going to see all of that in my autumn vlog. But if you're wondering why the bedsheets suddenly transform into a spooky theme, that's why. But back to what I was saying. A lot of people assume when they watch my videos and they see my house in constant stages and cycles of mess that I must have had no guidance as a child. I must have been brought up in a messy house with parents who didn't care to teach me any life skills. And they then go on to say, your boys are going to turn out just like you because you're not modelling appropriate behaviour. Let's put aside the fact that they don't see all of the parenting and effort that goes on behind the scenes, which I'll go into in a minute. But I was actually brought up in a pristine house. Just moving this box that Rudy will not let me get rid of. And we had this curtain put up because he struggles sleeping on his own, he gets really scared. And we thought putting a curtain up there might make him feel a little bit more protected and cocooned, but it didn't work and now it's sagging and it's a bit of a health risk, so I'm getting rid of it. But anyway, my stepdad was in the Navy and is extremely regimented and cannot stand mess. My mum also hates mess, is very house proud, and I lived and grew up in their house, and I did not meet their expectations despite continuous efforts to try and mould me into a tidier person that remembered to put her pots in the dishwasher and her rubbish in the bin. Nope. I was a child who was away with the fairies, living in a world inside my own head, and I'm writing more about this in my book, but this is just anecdotal, and I can't say this is the case for everybody, but living with tidy parents in a tidy house did not cure my inherent messiness and disorganisation. Because ultimately, it's to do with how my brain's wired, and I actually think, as much as I adore my mum and stepdad, I would have thrived more emotionally in a messier house. I would have felt more at ease and more like I was allowed to be myself. If you've watched a lot of my videos and you know me, you'll know I have messy, quirky, creative family members just like me. My dad, my auntie, my granddad. But I didn't live in a house with them. I wasn't raised full-time with them, and yet I am this way in my bones. I used to think it was all about nurture. As I move further and further into motherhood though, I realise just how much genetics play a role. I see my ex-mother-in-law in my eldest son, right down to her mannerisms and health anxieties. It's fascinating. I see my mum's defiance and rage in my youngest. Two completely different humans, and yet they were both raised in the same environment by the same mum, me, who practiced attachment parenting and carried them and snuggled them day in, day out. This discovery has helped me relinquish control and adjust my parenting to their particular dispositions. And that's my point. I think it's perfectly acceptable to do that, to grow and learn and evolve with your children. You might have had certain ideals and ideas about parenting, but you don't have to be loyal to them if they're not working or if they stop working for you and your family. Same as outside expectations and judgments, of which I've had plenty, from complete strangers and family members. It can knock your confidence and trigger you because parenting's the most important job in the world. It's gonna hit you in the heart when someone says or implies you're doing it wrong. But at the end of the day, these are your children. You know them better than anyone. And you've also got your own childhood experiences to pull from. And these often teach us what we're not going to do this time round with our kids, as much as what we want to do and be for them. I get a lot of suggestions when it comes to teaching my children to tidy. Turn it into a game, use a reward chart, do it alongside them, use a clean-up song. And these are actually all tactics I do use most days. If you noticed on the fridge in the previous two videos, my eldest has a chore chart, and every day he has a chore that's his responsibility and contribution to the household. And we are teaching them that everybody pitches in and we help each other in this house, especially considering how fast the mess happens. Despite our struggles with consistency, we absolutely do guide the children and try to instill habits and correct them when things get thrown on the floor. But of course, they're going to slip up and forget sometimes, especially my 3-year-old. Rudy, who's 8 now, he's tidier than me by far already, but again, not consistently. And that may purely be down to a defect in my parenting. I put my hands up. Because depending on how the day's gone, depending on my distractibility levels, even depending on my hormones, it all influences how on the ball I'm going to be that day. And I really do hate that. But I'm still hoping what I instill on my good days makes a difference. When he does his chores, we do it together, and I take the time to teach him and chat and make sure his experiences with housework and chores are positive, not something to be dreaded, but something to bond over. Knowing that I've got someone relying on me to teach them and be consistent has gotten me more on the ball with chores than I ever was before. And actually now, when I forget, he reminds me. And I take that as a sign that whatever I'm doing is working. Even though his room turned out like this again, he's taking things in. It's being absorbed. And we'll do better next time. It's no big deal and it can be solved. I grew up feeling so much shame because I knew I was a good person with a good heart and I wanted to do right and make people happy. And I wasn't being thoughtless or trying to hurt anybody by making mess. That's a feeling I never want my children to feel. And so now I'm a parent. When my children do absent-mindedly throw something on the floor, I know it's not from a place of malice or laziness. And I also know that sometimes all the consistency and habit building in the world won't change the fact that sometimes people are just wired differently. I want to instill as much organisational skills as I can in my boys, and I take that seriously, because like I said earlier, being this way is difficult. It's not all quirkiness and creativity, it's guilt and self-loathing and anxiety because you want so badly to have a peaceful environment. So I bear that in mind too as a mum, that it's my duty to give them as many tools as possible and send them off into the world as a functional adult. Not only that, raising sons, I want them to know that it's just as much their job to keep the house as their partner's. But I also want to preserve their hearts and their self-worth, because those things are way more important than having a tidy house. It's taken me years to unlearn and erase the critical voices in the back of my head that tell me I'm useless and unworthy because of the way my house looks. My ultimate goal in life is that my children's inner monologue is supportive and loving. I promise you nothing's more important than that. The words they hear in the home, the encouragement, the support, even the apologies when we do wrong, those are the voices that are going to stick with them for life. It's impossible to be a perfect parent or be in a consistent mood from day to day. But I think as long as we're putting in effort when we can, we're showing up emotionally, we're being enthusiastic about all their great qualities, acknowledging our own limitations, being honest about that with them, spending quality time and having quality conversations, it means the world and makes all the difference. As I was getting to know Rudy, I worried a lot about how we were going to connect. He didn't talk until he was way into his 3rd year. Doesn't stop talking now, but that's by the by. I noticed that he listens best when he's moving. I'm also now noticing him being criticised out in the world for that exact thing. He's being accused of ignorance. I can't change how the outside world is going to treat my children, but I can be their comfort. And I might not be able to be consistent with a lot of things, but I can be a consistent, safe place and the scaffolding that keeps their structure of self-worth standing. And that means everything to me.